WisconsinEye is at the Republican State Convention in Milwaukee. We're interviewing 6th District Congressman Tom Petri, who first elected in a special election in 1979 and made a big announcement here a few weeks ago, not going to seek re-election. Was that a tough decision, Congressman?
Well, it's something that you think about, obviously, each 2 years when you're running. I try to take it one step at a time, but I'm happy to have had the opportunity to represent a wonderful district in the state of Wisconsin for a number of Congresses, and wish whoever gets the opportunity after the next election well as they do that job.
Major factors in your decision to not seek re-election, Congressman?
Well, there are a lot of different factors. No one thing. I mean, none of us get younger. Time goes on, and on the other hand, you're working on things. You'd like to see them through. There are a number of things we're hoping to get done this Congress. May or may not happen. So that would be an argument for trying to seek the support of people for another term. But overall, I'm happy with the opportunity I had to serve, and it's a great opportunity having to work with my colleagues in the United States Congress to do our best to represent a lot of different views and see if we can find common ground and move things forward for the United States.
Were you surprised when Senator Grothman announced that he planned to challenge you in a primary? Was that a factor in your decision, sir?
Oh, I wouldn't say it's not a factor, but it wasn't the factor at all. I had an opponent in the last primary, and of course, when I was first elected, there were 7 of us in the Republican primary, so it's nothing new, and it's a good thing that people have choices.
Is there any significance, do you think, more conservatives, when I look at your decision, the decisions by Senators Ellis, Senator Schultz, Representative Steve Castell, are more conservative members of your party coming forth to push people like you to the sidelines? Do you see any of this generational debate in this, sir?
Well, each party is a coalition, and I talk to my Democratic friends in Congress. In our party, no matter how conservative or liberal you vote, there are a certain number of people who call you a rhino, Republican in name only. On the Democratic side, they call you a dino, a Democrat in name only. It just seems to be that some people figure if you don't vote 100% the way they want, that you're not adequate. But then sometimes they change their mind. So how could you possibly know that they're going to change their mind and vote differently than they wanted 2 years ago, and then be with what they want this year? So it's basically an impossible task. You just have to basically do the best you can and try to represent the district that elected you, and obviously work for the best interest of the whole country.
Before we talk about some current issues, I want to ask you to compare the U.S. House that you entered in 1979 with the U.S. House of 2014. Talk about the major changes over that 35-year period, sir.
Well, I think probably the major change, in my opinion, it's a little bit inside baseball, but it used to be that there were a lot of people who were called the powerful chairman of this committee or that committee, and over the succeeding years, whether it's been under a Democratic speakership or Republican speakership, the independence of the committees has been gradually eroded, in my opinion, compared with the way it was. And so when people talk about more partisanship, part of it's perception, because members of committees, though they may differ on different issues, usually share a lot of interests. That's why they're on the committee, whether it's a strong defense on the Armed Forces Services Committee, or national infrastructure on the Transportation Committee, maintaining adequate roads and ports and airports and all the rest, or commitment to having the best education system in the world, and making sure that local school districts and others have the authority that they need to do that. So people at the committee level do tend to work together. When you get to the the party leader level, well, their job is to lead the group, keep it together, fight the other side, and not necessarily, they don't necessarily have the background or expertise, nor do their staff, on the different pieces of legislation the way those and the staff people on the committees do. So the result has been running things through a more partisan sieve than in the
What
past.
about the explosion of money in the third-party groups that now spend hundreds of $millions in the wake of Citizens United? Is that a good trend or no?
It's just always been an issue. Before I got there was someone called Bobby Baker who was running around, who was known as Lyndon Johnson's bag man. Yeah. There have been efforts for generations now to try to have more disclosure, more reporting. I've always thought that it's basically impossible to eliminate all money from politics, because you have to advertise and get your word out, and it costs something. And so the thought I've had is that it would be better to try to encourage small contributions so that people are less reliant on a few large contributions. And I've introduced legislation over the years to give people a tax credit or tax deduction for that. That used to be the case before we went to this checkoff system where a dollar was put into a fund and then spent evenly between candidates from both political parties. That funding for that's dried up a lot. The major candidates don't. If you do that, you have to accept spending limits, and they don't want to do it. So President Obama didn't use the election fund, and nor did his Republican opponent.
What about the processes of Congress? In recent years, I think the U.S. Senate went 6 years without passing a budget, and in a new era of government shutdowns. Why are we in this gridlock that sometimes force government to shut down, Congressman? What has changed?
I think what changed was that people we didn't have gridlock when recently, when President Obama was elected. He had with him a Democratic majority in the Senate and a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives, and chose to use that majority to pass major overhaul of our national health care system on a straight party line vote, not a single Republican, no real effort to pick the best ideas in both parties and to kind of build a coalition, which had been done in the past on major social reform legislation. So I think there was a kind of a reaction to that, and the Republicans were put in the majority in the House of Representatives to make sure that that didn't happen again. Now that's called gridlock, because the president wants to do things his way, but he can't force the House of Representatives to do it his way, and he's been unwilling to, there have been efforts, but they've not been successful in most cases to kind of find middle ground.
The president says it's a victory that 8 million people have enrolled under the Affordable Care Act. Is that a fair claim, Congressman?
All I know is that when it was brought up, one of the arguments for it was that there were some 47 million people who were uninsured. Yes. I don't know how many are uninsured now. That's not a figure that we're talking about. A lot of the people who have been signing up had insurance but have lost it. And I'm not sure if they're signing up for policies that are better or worse than the ones that they had before. When I meet with the hospitals in our area, they say that one of the things that was a selling point for the Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Care Act, was that if you could get everyone to get insurance, hospitals would not have a big accounts receivable problem, and the cost shifting that occurs when people go to the emergency room, they don't pay for their health care, and that means people who do have insurance, or employers that are providing for the employees, have higher premiums as a result. But at least what they're telling me so far is that their accounts receivable are going up, not down, because people are buying policies on the exchange, but they have a bigger deductible than they're used to, and they're not able to pay the
pay those
deductible.
Out-of-pocket deductibles?
Right. So it'll take a while for this to shake down and people to see. But meanwhile, of course, in our state, over 90% of the people did insurance coverage, generally provided by their employer, and a lot of employers, especially the smaller ones, are facing changes in the policies that they've had because of the federal mandates that they have to provide certain types of coverage, whether it's as appropriate as the package that they had put together with their employees before, and that tends to raise costs. So it's, we'll see how this all plays out, but right now it's clearly of some help to some people, but it's raising costs and causing anxiety for other people.
Let's talk about, you chair the subcommittee that deals with highway funding.
Yeah.
Now there's talk that highway fund's going to be running out of money.
It is, yeah.
Well, very soon, correct?
Right.
Why is there an impasse and a gridlock, and how do you expect it? Will it be broken, sir?
Well, the federal role in surface transportation, highways, bridges, and all the rest, is funded by a user fee called a gasoline tax or a diesel fuel tax. Yes. So that if you use the roads, you've got to buy fuel and help maintain the roads that you're using. That's been traditional since the federal role was established. The interstate highway system was built back in the Eisenhower years. But the last time that was addressed was 1993. I don't know if you drive a 1993 car, the mileage is probably not as good as a new car.
Right.
And so you're driving more miles with the same gasoline, so you're not paying any more into the trust fund, but you are using or you're paying less into the trust fund for the same number of travel. So what's happened is that the money coming into the transportation trust fund, because of that, more fuel efficiency, alternative fuels, slow down the economy, a whole variety of reasons, has not kept up to projections and is only adequate now to cover about 60% of what is currently being spent.
60%?
60%.
Huge shortfall.
A huge shortfall. Many states, because it's a federal-state partnership, and there are state gas taxes and diesel fuel taxes and license fees and so on that go into state transportation funds in Wisconsin or other states. Many states are facing the same problem. So there are a lot of ideas as to how to deal with this, but the Federal Transportation Trust Fund is projected to run out of money just to pay current bills. Maybe this August.
In August. As soon as August.
As soon as August. The current federal legislation expires the end of September, so there may be some kind of it's before the election. It's a controversial thing. The president has indicated in the past that he would veto any diesel fuel or gasoline tax increase.
Okay.
It doesn't poll very well. No one likes tax increases, but the American Trucking Association, that represents the trucking industry, has been favoring a diesel fuel tax increase for their own members. Not that they're in the business of making life more difficult for truckers, but they recognize we need to have a first-class infrastructure, and after examining all the alternatives, they still think the fairest way to fund it is on a user fee basis, using fuel as a proxy. Over time, that's going to change as we can do mileage charges off satellite and other new technology, but right now that's the thing that they think is what they're recommending that we do so far as the trucking and diesel fuel side of it. They're looking at other alternatives. The Ways and Means Committee is suggesting maybe that we could and the president are saying, well, maybe there's some changes in taxes on corporations that could be used to fund this, but until there's a meeting of the minds, we're going to have to do a short-term bill. If we do more than just one, it will be very bad because as I said, it's a federal-state partnership,
yes.
And if we can get my goal would be to get a 6-year bill in
Yes.
place, funded.
Yes.
And to do that, we will have to come up with about $18–20 billion a year new money.
Right.
Otherwise, even if we pass a 6-year bill but we don't fund it for 6 years, it's going to be subject to annual appropriation or borrowing or whatever, and there'll be a lot of uncertainty in the states as to whether that money is going to be there. And the result is they'll tend to hold back on major projects because they don't want to start them and then have to stop them, and it'll make the whole system less efficient. One other point people really should think about. We just in this part of we're sitting in Milwaukee. We just went through the new Marquette interchange. It's a beautiful upgrading of the highway.
Yes.
People were driving through that as it was being done. It often costs more to maintain and upgrade existing major transportation infrastructure than to build new. If you're building new, there aren't any distractions. It's in an open field. But if you're trying to do something like the Marquette interchange, it would be cheaper for the transportation side of things just to close it down and build new. But meanwhile, the economy would take a big hit. Right. Delays, more cost. So it costs more money to jury rig, to work in off-peak hours, do all this, and that's comes out of the Transportation Trust Fund. And to maintain that, if it's more efficient for the economy to pay a little more into the Transportation Trust Fund and pay less in repairs and maintenance, have less delays, and all the rest of it. But there's a selling job to be done because no one wants, obviously, to needlessly pay increasing user fees. Wyoming, really one of the most conservative states in the country, just doubled its gas tax.
It did.
They had the lowest in the country. They examined all the alternatives, talked about it for 4 years, and after looking at all the alternatives, they finally decided that the responsible thing to do, and they don't have mass transit in Wyoming. They drive 30,000 miles a year on average. Yeah. So it's a big hit for rural people, agricultural people, and all the rest. But they felt the responsible thing to do was to double their gas tax rather than borrowing the money and sending the bill to their kids, in effect. So that's a national conversation. We're going to have to decide. Maybe there's some combination of things that can be done to come up with the necessary revenue, but to just ignore the need for maintaining and even upping the investment in surface transportation is, in my opinion, not really much of an option. The private sector is increasing investment substantially right now. The railroads, freight railroads, are investing billions of dollars. The telecommunication companies are investing billions of dollars upgrading the electrical grid, upgrading the thing. So the private sector that is part of our transportation and the network that supports our economy are stepping up to bat. We're not right now on the federal side. We're lagging, and we're going to have to address that.
Wisconsin is one of the states that faces a shortfall. Right. And Speaker Voss has said, I support tolling, but that current law that says you cannot toll on existing interstate highways. Now that's is that something that could be changed so you could toll on all new and old interstate highways, Congressman?
This is something that's being looked at constantly. It was looked at when the interstate highway system was set up. When you start getting into it, you can do tolling on new lanes that are being built.
Yes.
And that's being done big time right now. There are billions of dollars going into new lanes in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, for example, with private money from a Spanish international consortium, and that will be paid for. The service of that private money will be paid for by tolls on the lanes that they're putting in.
But you don't see the current law being repealed to let tolls be charged on existing interstates?
There are a couple of things. One, it tends to create a situation with the national system where you're cherry picking it, because high volume areas makes a lot of sense. Well, go to Delaware, they call it tax exporting. And Delaware is a little state, and about every 10 miles you pay another dollar on the interstate highway system. They make a lot of money for other purposes, like charging drivers from New York and Pennsylvania and so on who are going through the little state of Delaware, that bottleneck. It's the way it used to be on the Rhine in ancient days, where all these kingdoms would put
Tolls.
Toll booths. But you get out to rural areas that are necessary as part of the national system, it doesn't pay very much. The other thing is that when you toll, it tends to make it a closed system. You go out to some of the eastern areas, they have oases and all the rest, so it disadvantages local businesses, where people now, with an open system, get off at an interchange, stop at a local motel, go to a locally owned gas station, all the rest. And so there are a lot of angles to doing this that aren't apparent at first and that we really have to think through.
I understand. Well, your aides say you have to go give a speech to the state convention, so thank you for your time. Congratulations on your service, and thanks for visiting with WisconsinEye.
Good to be on Wisconsin.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.